האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה?
Okay. Erev Tov and good evening. Dobro V'yetcher. We are in the Zera Shimshon on Parshas Mishpatim. We're going to do Os Tes, section number 9. Before we begin, we're going to take a look at two psukim from Parshas Mishpatim. This is Perek Chaf Gimel, psukim Chaf Hey and Chaf Vav. Va'avadetem es Hashem Elokechem, and you should serve Hashem your God. Uveirach es lachmecha ve'es meimecha, and he will bless your bread and your water. V'hasirosi machala mikirbecha, and he will remove sickness from among you. Pasuk Chavav, lo sihya mishakela va'akara be'artzecha. There will not be a woman who loses her children and a barren woman be'artzecha in your land. Es mispar yomecha amale. The number of your days I will fill. So it appears that these two psukim are talking about four blessings that will come to the Jewish people if they serve Hashem properly. Hashem will bless our bread and water. That would be one. Hashem will remove sickness from among us. That would be two. There will not be a woman who has stillborn babies and an akara, a barren woman in our land. Would be three. Mispar yamecha amalei, and Hashem will fill our days. We will live out our days and have the blessing of long life. That would be four. But as we're going to see in the Gemara, it's considered three blessings as opposed to four blessings. And at the very end of the piece, the Zera Shimshon, after explaining other things, at the very end, he'll deal with the question of how come the pasuk seems to be talking about four things, but in the Gemara, they view it as if it's really only three main blessings, and one thing is kind of subsumed under another bracha, under another blessing. So let's get right into the Zera Shimshon. This is Os Tes, section number 9. Pasuk. The pasuk says, this of course is the pasuk we just read, Uveirach es lachmecha ve'es meimecha, and Hashem will bless your bread and your water, v'chule, etc. Lo siyeh mishakela va'akara be'artzecha. There will not be a woman who loses her children and a barren woman in your land. Es mispar yamecha amalei. I will fill the number of your days. Those are the two psukim. Shalosh havtochos halolu. These three promises, so you can see the Zera Shimshon is already referring to the number three promises as opposed to the apparent four. But these three promises, Hein Mai de Omar Rava, they are the promises that Rava, the Talmudic sage Rava, is referring to B'shilhei Moed Katan, at the end of the tractate, the Talmudic tractate of Moed Katan, when he says the following, Bonei, Chaye, Umizone, the promises from Hashem, the blessings from Hashem of having children and having mizone, sustenance, and having Chaye, and having a long life, Umizone, and having sustenance, those three blessings, Lo bizechusa talya milsa, they are not dependent upon a person's merit, ela bimazola talya milsa, but rather they are dependent on a person's mazel. Now we should pause here because this statement is very fundamental, of fundamental importance, and also is somewhat baffling, as we'll see. But let's take a look at the statement just in its own right to understand it on a simple level. So Rava in the Gemara of Tractate Moed Katan is telling us that the promises we see in the psukim of having children and of having a long life and of having sustenance, they're not dependent upon a particular merit that a person might receive from doing mitzvos, for example, but rather they're dependent upon a person's mazel. What does that mean? So the word mazel can mean different things in different contexts. And here the word mazel means a predetermined gezerah, kind of a predetermined gezerah from Hashem. So rather than be dependent upon a person's merits, it's dependent upon a determination that would already have either been made by Hashem or not made by Hashem. So let's take sustenance as an example. A person might think if they are blessed with plentiful mazonos, plentiful food, and they can afford to buy whatever they and their family would like to eat, a person might think that must be a reward for certain mitzvos that I've done that brought me zechuyos, that brought me merit, and therefore Hashem blessed me with this food. Rav is saying that's not accurate. It's toloi and mazel. Hashem made a decision earlier on, a predetermined decision or a predestined determination beforehand that you and your family would be blessed with mazonos. And so you have mazonos. So that to us seems like a very unusual statement for Rava to make, but that's the statement that he made in the Gemara at the end of Moed Katan. And just what he's saying about sustenance and food is also what he's saying about whether or not a person is blessed with having children and whether or not a person is blessed with a long life. Zera Shimshon continues, Uvishil Hey Shabbos, and at the end of the Talmudic tractate of Masechah Shabbos, Kosvu HaTosfos, the commentary of Tosfos writes, De al yidei zuchus godol mishtane hamazel, that through great merit a person's mazel can be changed. That would mean, let's take our example of the sustenance. Let's imagine the determination had been made for a person that he was instead of being blessed with a tremendous amount of sustenance, the person a determination had been made that he would struggle for food. He would be a poor person, a person who food and money did not come easily to. So in such a case, the commentary of Tosfos writes that if that person does something that brings him or her great merit, extraordinary merit, so not just kind of regular run-of-the-mill day-to-day zuchus or zuchuyos, but rather extraordinary merit, then that can change the original mazel, and now the person can be blessed with plentiful mizonos, with plentiful sustenance, even though the original mazel had been predetermined that the person would have limited mizonos. So that's the statement of Tosfos. If we stop here at the end of the first paragraph, we would think that in these three areas of life, sustenance, children, and length of days, either things are determined by mazel, or let me rephrase. We would think, based on Rava's statement, that things are determined by mazel, a predetermination by Hashem. And we would understand that in cases of extraordinary merit, the mazel could be changed. So a person might have certain limitations that then can be taken away. The chains can be broken. The limitations can be expanded or removed because of something the person does to bring himself or herself great merit. That's what we would think so far. Next paragraph. V'koshe, this is difficult. The mikan nira, from here, meaning from the psukim, it would appear de bizuchusa dafka tolya milsa, that it is completely based on a person's merit as to whether or not they're going to be blessed with children, sustenance, and long life. Mida Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because it says in the pasuk that Hashem says lekayim lahem elu havtachos, that if they serve Hashem, they're going to receive these promises. So the Zera Shimshon says, whatever we might have come away from thinking from the Gemara and the Tosfos mentioned in the first paragraph, if we simply look at the psukim again, we should see, or we will probably see, it'll kind of smack us in the face that it says if a person serves Hashem, which means they do things to bring merit, they do mitzvos, and they receive zechuyos, they receive merit for that, then that's it. Based on that merit that they get for serving Hashem, they will receive the promises of sustenance, children, and long life. And that doesn't fit with what Rava stated in the Gemara. It doesn't fit with Tosfos. It doesn't seem to fit what Tosfos said about needing extraordinary merit. And the Zera Shimshon actually is going to address that point right now. Even though it does say in the pasuk you should serve Hashem, so maybe it means you should serve Hashem, and that will bring you extraordinary merit. Zera Shimshon says, "Lo mashma sheyeh zeh." It doesn't seem to mean that this will be al yedei zechus gadol, through some great merit, some extraordinary merit, right? Serving Hashem, the Zera Shimshon says, simply means doing the mitzvos. It doesn't seem to mean serving Hashem in some kind of really unique, extraordinary, special way that would bring a person some kind of unique zuchus gadol, a tremendous merit, which is what Tosfos was referring to. So we have a very simple problem. It's a contradiction. In Gemara language, they call it a stira. This is an apparent stira, an apparent contradiction between the psukim that we read, that the Zera Shimshon started with, which seemed to say if a person simply is a good yid, he does the mitzvos, then he will receive the blessings of the promises and the psukim of sustenance, long life, and children. That's what the psukim seem to indicate. And we have the Gemara from the end of Maseches Moed Katan that the Zera Shimshon quoted, where Rava says it's not at all based on a person's merit. These promises are based on mazel. And then we even have the commentary Tosfos saying, no, merit can play a role, but it would have to be zuchus godol. It would have to be extraordinarily high level of merit to change a person's mazel. But the psukim don't seem to indicate that. So what do we do with these different sources, and how do we synthesize them? How do we fit them together in a coherent manner? Next paragraph. V'yesh lomar, and we can say, the inachinami, that we need to concede the velo zuchus gadol, without extraordinary merit, b'mazola talya milsa. These things are generally dependent upon a person's mazel, a predetermination, a predestined determination by Hashem. V'HaKadosh Baruch Hu mavticham, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is promising these three things. She'af below zuchus gadol, even if a person doesn't have great merit, below hishtanus hamazel, and if a person's mazel isn't changed, Yiyelahem tovos halalu. These three things, these three good things will apply to a person, will come to a person. V'hainu, and this is what it means. She'im hamazel yiyeh, if in a particular situation, a person's mazel, she'echad mi Yisrael yiyelo mizonos mitzumtzamim. A person's mazel, let's say the Zera Shimshon says in a hypothetical case, a person's mazel was that he should have limited mizonos, limited access to food and necessities. HaKadosh Baruch Hu yevorech osan hamizonos. The pasuk is saying Hashem will give a special bracha to that person's food. Sheyochal kimo, he'll eat a little because he only has a little. V'yiyeh hapas, and the bread will be, top of the next column, misborech b'meyav. It will be blessed in his insides, in his digestive system. Uvahachi lo yapoch hamazel. Through this, there's not going to be necessary any kind of change to the person's mazel. V'ha'oni yisadein, but the poor man will be enjoying berevach, as in satisfaction, kamo ha'oshir, like a wealthy person, v'yochal, and he'll eat his little bit of bread, v'yispa, and he will be satisfied, v'yosir, and he'll even be able to leave some over. So let's pause for a minute. So the Zera Shimshon is saying these psukim are saying a very special, unique thing. The psukim that we read are saying that Hashem will, in certain situations, bless a person so that even though that person's mazel might have originally been that he would have not not much success in terms of bringing in food for himself and his family. Nonetheless, Hashem will put a bracha, because it says, Uveirach es lachmecha umeimecha. Hashem will bless this person's bread and water, and the person will feel satisfied, so satisfied, in fact, that it's as if he'll feel like a wealthy man sitting at a table covered with all kinds of luxuries and delicacies. He'll feel fully satiated, and he'll even say, I can leave a little over from my meal for tomorrow, or I can share even a little with someone else because I feel so satiated. That will be the special bracha that comes in. So in that sense, mazel plays a role, but the special bracha comes in, and that will apply even without the zuchus gadol, even without the extraordinary merit that the commentary of Tosfos mentioned. Next paragraph, V'zehu she'amar hakosuv, and this is what the pasuk is saying. Va'avadetem es Hashem Elokeichem, and you will serve Hashem, uveirachas lachmecha ve'esmeimecha, and Hashem will bless your bread and your water. Midikosav lachmecha umeimecha dafka. From the fact that the pasuk used the word your bread and your water, it could have said Hashem will bless the bread and the water, but it said Hashem will bless your bread and your water. Shma mino, we learn from this, Sherot Solomar, what the pasuk means to say is, Oso halechem sheyeh lecha lefi mazalcha. The bread that you will have because of your specific mazel. V'lo yeh lecha zechus gadol lishanos hamazel. That we're not saying, the pasuk is not saying you need some great merit to change the mazel. It's saying your bread, based on your mazel, zeh ha'me'at, a little bit of bread that you will get, im habracha, with the special bracha mentioned in the pasuk, yisbarech, will be blessed, v'yaseh kemo sheyeh harbe, and it will do for you as if you had a lot of bread, a lot of food and mizonos. So that's how the Zera Shimshon is kind of, you might say, threading the needle. He's working with the sources, and he has developed a way of understanding and explaining the pasuk so that it fits with all of the sources. At this point, the pasuk is coming to say Hashem's going to give people a special bracha that doesn't abrogate their mazel, it doesn't nullify their mazel, and it also doesn't require zuchus gadol. But the bracha is saying that, again, in the Zera Shimshon's example of mizonos, of sustenance, that they will only have a little bread because that's their mazel, but it will satisfy them because that's the special bracha described in the pasuk. Next paragraph. V'chein nami es mispar yomecha amale. Similarly, the Zera Shimshon says we can explain the part of the pasuk that said, the days of the number of your days I will fill. What exactly is that? How does that bracha work? Ratzolomar, this means to say, shelo yeshana hamazal lahosif. It will not change the original determination to add days and years to what a person's mazel originally was, what their predetermined number of years was. It won't add to that. Aval lo yivchos mehem. The pasuk is saying it will also not subtract from those years. The Beperek Daled the Yevamos, in the 4th chapter of Maseches Yevamos, Amrinon, we say zocha, if a person merits it, mosifin lo, then years can be added to his life. Lo zocha, if he doesn't merit it, pochasin lo, then years can be subtracted from his life. V'zocha, when it says if he merits it, Ratzolomar, this means to say zuchus gadol, if he has great merit, extraordinary merit. So if a person has a certain amount of years that is originally planned for him, originally established for him, and he does things to attain great, extraordinary zechuyos, merit, then years can be added to his number of years. K'moshe Kosav Sham Maharsha, as the commentary Maharsha writes on that Gemara in Yevamos, Lefi Divrei HaTosfos, according to the words of the Tosfos HaNizkar La'el, which were previously mentioned. Ve'achshav, so adding to a person's years requires the zechus gadol that Tosfos mentioned previously. Ve'achshav, and now hivtichon akosav, in our psukim Hashem is promising sha'af al pi she'ein lahem zechus gadol, even if a person doesn't have a great extraordinary merit, lo yivchasu ela yashlimu, the person will not lose years. Years or days will not be subtracted, will not be reduced from the originally designated number of years. Ela yashlimu, they will be completely fulfilled. Next paragraph. Ve'im tomar, and if you say, meaning if you want to ask the following question, ma tzorech lahavtacha zo, why does a person need this promise? V'halo, is it not true? Einon pochasin ela lemisha lo zacha. Is it not true that Chazal were teaching us in that Gemara mentioned in the previous paragraph, Maseches Yevamos, that we don't take away from a person's years unless he's lo zacha? He's not a meritorious person. So if a person hasn't done anything to be considered lo zacha, not a meritorious person, then why would we even think that they need a special bracha to keep the amount of years that was originally set for them? How would it ever occur to us, lomar, to say, sheyivchasu lemi sheyizkeh, that we're going to take away years from someone who's a basically meritorious person, but he doesn't have zuchus gadol, he doesn't have extraordinary merit. Afal pi shein lo zuchus gadol, even though he doesn't have extraordinary merit. How would it occur to us to think that somehow his designated years would be lessened and he needs the special bracha in these psukim, in our Parsha, to say you'll be able to live out completely the amount of years that you were originally given? Why does any person need that bracha? That should be the basic assumption. You were given a certain amount of years to live. And you've been a basically good person. You don't have extraordinary merit, but you're a meritorious person. You're a good person. You're keeping the mitzvos. Why do they need a special bracha just to maintain the amount of years that they were originally given? Next page, column on the right. The hachanami kasha, and this is also a question, l'sfaras Rabbi Akiva, according to the viewpoint of Rabbi Akiva, beperak daled de Yevamos, in the 4th chapter of Maseches Yevamos, de ka'amar, he says, this is now quoting the statement from Rabbi Akiva in that Gemara, zacha, if a person merits it, mashlimin lo, then they fulfill his years. He fills out his years if he's zacha, if he has the merit. Matzorach sheyizkeh. What merit, what special merit does a person need to have his years fulfilled? V'halo, is it not true? Afilu im yeh benoni, even if he's just a regular good person. Lo yivchasu lo, they're not going to decrease his years. Shahare ein pochasin, because the Gemara said we don't decrease a person's years. Ela ledafka lemisha lo zacha. Only specifically in the case of a person who is lacking in merit, not just a person who has regular kind of standard average run-of-the-mill merit. So the Zera Shimshon has posed 2 questions on how we're going to understand the special blessing in the psukim that we read. How are we going to understand them in light of the fact that they seem to say that a person can lose years and needs a special bracha not to lose years, even if they don't have zechus gadol. So he's going to explain that now. V'yesh lomar, next paragraph. And we can say, shelif amim adam mazik briuso b'shogeg. Sometimes a person can harm his health accidentally, b'machal or b'mishteh, perhaps what they eat or drink. So a person is just eating and drinking normally. They're not trying to intake anything that's dangerous or unhealthy. Unknowingly, they might, however, harm their health because of something they eat or drink. Or perhaps they might unknowingly, accidentally harm their health in a different way. Kigon, for example, la'avor b'makom sakana. Maybe they will go into a dangerous place, shelo yadaba, that the person didn't know was dangerous. So totally accidentally, a person might eat something that harms his or her health. A person might put himself in a situation or go to a certain location that's dangerous, even though the person had no way of knowing that it was a dangerous location. And now it's possible that some kind of thing can happen, and the person can actually become endangered, totally accidentally. The thing that the person consumed can put his life in danger. The place that the person went accidentally went to a dangerous place, that can put his life in danger. And therefore, in such cases, mafticho hakosub, the pasuk is promising him, sheyishmerehu me'elu hamikrim haroim. Hashem will protect him from these bad things, kedei lahashlim yomav, in order to complete his number of days, in order that he will be able to live out his originally decreed number of years and days. Next paragraph. However, lemisha lo zacha, if a person is not a meritorious person, meaning up until now in that previous paragraph, the Zera Shimshon was describing that Hashem will give special protection to the person in those situations. That's because the person was a meritorious person, not zechus gadol, not extraordinarily meritorious, but rather a Benoni, a regular good person. So he'll be protected based on what it says in the pasuk. However, if a person is not a meritorious person, lo dai, it is not only true shelo yatziluhu, that he will not receive special salvation in those situations, ela adarabba, but just the opposite. Pochasin lo mamish, his number of years on earth will actually be decreased. Afim hoyazoris, even though he's trying to be careful, lihinotzel mehamikrim, to protect himself, to save himself from these bad things. So the Zera Shimshon has kind of, again, thread the needle or reworked the situation so that now he is giving an explanation to the pasuk about how and why a person needs a special bracha and can benefit from the special bracha of his years being fulfilled. That's what the pasuk talks about. Hashem says, I will fill your years, your days, the number of your days will be filled. What does that mean? Your number of your, wouldn't that happen anyway for regular good people? No, yes, the answer is yes, that will happen. But the bracha is coming to say, even if the person does some things that could harm his health, still he'll get a special protection from these brachos and be protected from those things, even without extraordinary merit, just with standard merit. Next paragraph. However, bivonim, when it comes to children, kosav, the pasuk says, lo sihiyet mishakela, there will not be among you a woman who loses her children. That means she either the children, chas v'sholem, die very soon after birth, or she's not able to bring a baby to birth. So the pasuk says that will not happen. That's the special bracha. V'chule, etc. Meaning the etc. part was where it said there will not be barren women who are incapable of having babies. Umikan nira, and from here it would appear shemishane hamazel, that what the pasuk is saying is that a person's predetermined status will be changed. V'kosha, and then in that case, if that's true, we have a problem. Lama dafka bazeh. Why specifically when it comes to children, bringing children into the world, yishtane hamazel, is the pasuk saying that the person's previously determined status will be changed. In other words, if a person's mazel was that they will not be able to have children, let's imagine a case of the woman. So her status was that she would be an akara, she would be a barren woman, and she wouldn't be able to have children. If that was the mazel, this pasuk is saying you're going to get a special blessing. She's going to get a special blessing to be able to become pregnant and have children. So that's a change in the mazel. So the Zera Shimshon all along has been trying to walk that fine line, that tightrope, to say, on the one hand, we're not changing a person's mazel because, according to Rava, he said that's not the way things work. The mazel has to stay the way it's originally established. And on the other hand, to change anything, you need schus gadol, according to Tosfos. So the Zera Shimshon's walking between those two parameters. But here, suddenly, it looks like the pasuk is saying, in the case of having children, bringing children into the world, a person's mazel can be changed. Next paragraph. V'yesh lomar, and we can say the Isa b'perakama de Rosh Hashanah. It states in the first chapter of Maseches Rosh Hashanah. Shlosha divorim, and three things, mekarin gizardino shel adam, they tear up the verdict on a person. Three things can help bring about tearing up the verdict on a person. Those three things are tefillah, prayer, tzedakah, giving charity, acts of kindness and tzedakah and charity, and changing a person's name, which goes along with changing a person's actions. Those three things can cause a gzar din to be torn up and a punishment to be averted. The yesh omrim, and there's another, and some people say, af shinoi makom, that in addition to those three things, even if a person changes where he lives or where he or she lives, that can also tear up a gazar din. Like we find regarding Avram Avinu, he lived outside of Eretz Yisrael. He lived in Haran, and he was not able to have children, and he moved to Eretz Yisrael, and he was ultimately able to have children after he moved. So he changed the place where he lived, and this opinion says that shows you if you change the place where you live, it can change a gazar din about you. Ve'idach, the other opinion, meaning the first opinion in the Gemara, did not include change of makom, shinoi makom. It didn't include it. How could it not include it? How does the first opinion understand what happened with Avram Avinu? Here's the answer. Hahu zechusa de'eretz Yisrael hu da'ahanyale. According to the first opinion, there is no idea that all a person has to do is change where he or she lives, and that can change and tear up a gazar din. That's not true according to the first opinion. That's only the viewpoint of the second opinion in that Gemara. According to the first opinion, changing the place where you live doesn't necessarily accomplish anything for you in terms of this aspect of tearing up a gazar din and changing your what's going to happen with you in life. However, Avraham, it did make a dramatic change in his life, and he was able to have children, but that's not just because he moved per se. It's because he came to live in Eretz Yisrael. The zechus of living in Eretz Yisrael is what made Avraham able to bring children into the world. And that's the key point in that story. The Omar HaKosov, and now let's look back at what the pasuk says, Losia mishakela va'akara be'artsecha. You will not have a woman who loses her children or a barren woman in your land, dafka, specifically in Eretz Yisrael. This bracha is not a general bracha. It's not a universal bracha. It's saying if you're in Eretz Yisrael, you will receive the bracha about not having a mishakela and an akara and being able to bring children into the world. V'hainu mishum schus Eretz Yisrael. It's because of the merit of Eretz Yisrael. That's why Avraham was able to have children, and that's why you won't have you can receive the bracha of a mishakela and an akara, able to have children and give birth to healthy babies in Eretz Yisrael because of the special schus of Eretz Yisrael. And that's part and parcel of what the bracha is saying in the case of bringing children into the world. Next paragraph. Ela da'adayin kasha. We still have a problem. As Zera Shimshon says, things are still a little problematic. Im schus yeshivas Eretz Yisrael, if the merit of living in Eretz Yisrael, nikras schus gadol, is considered a great enough merit, it's considered an extraordinary merit, lishanos, to change hamazal shel bonim, the determination about children, right? So a person's mazel is, God forbid, not to have children. Zera Shimshon is saying if they move to Eretz Yisrael, then this bracha is saying that can change their mazel and they can be blessed with children. If that's true, then living in Eretz Yisrael should also be considered a great merit, even for long life, and for sustenance. Why doesn't the same thing work? Why aren't we consistent? And if living in Eretz Yisrael is not considered a great special merit, an extraordinary merit for long life and sustenance, my shna bane, what difference does it make regarding bringing children into the world? That this thing should change a person's mazel. This thing meaning living in Eretz Yisrael. So this paragraph, the Zera Shimshon is saying we're still not where we need to be, because to get where we need to be, we have to, from all sides, understand how the three brachos, the three promises work in our psukim, and we have to understand how all the Gemaras and all the sources that the Zera Shimshon has brought, how they work and fit together. So the Zera Shimshon says we still have a problem. At this point, living in Eretz Yisrael is only helpful for a person in terms of the promise of children. It doesn't seem to have any special impact on mizon, chaye and mizone, on long life and sustenance, and Zera Shimshon wants to know why that should be true. Next paragraph. V'yesh lomar, and we can say, shel olam hakodesh, shel olam hakodesh baruch hu moded mida keneged mida. Let's read that again. V'yesh lomar, and we can say, shel olam hakodesh baruch hu moded mida keneged mida. Hashem is always rewarding people measure for measure. You can see that's based on a Gemara statement by Chazal and Maseches Sanhedrin. The Beperik Yud Gimel Diksubis, and now we're going to specifically apply that general rule. In the 13th chapter of Maseches Ksubis Amrinon, we say, Kol Hadar Be'eretz Yisrael, everyone who lives in Eretz Yisrael, Dome, it's as if Kimisha Yeshlo Elokah, that person has a God. If you live in Eretz Yisrael, then it's as if you have a God. V'chol hadar bechutz la'aretz, and everyone who lives outside of Eretz Yisrael, dome, it's as if Kimisha ein lo Elokah. It's as if he doesn't have a God. What a powerful, what an amazing statement from the Gemara in Ksubis. If you live in Eretz Yisrael, it's as if you have a God, but if you live outside of Eretz Yisrael, it's as if you don't have a God. Shenemar, as it says, lo seis lachem es Eretz Canaan, to give to you the land of Canaan, liyos lachem lelokim, to be for you a God. So that pasuk says, I'm giving you Eretz Canaan, I'm giving you Eretz Yisrael, you can live in Eretz Yisrael, to be for you a God. That's where it's as if you can have the relationship with Hashem. Ubeperik Vov the Yevamos, in the 6th chapter of Maseches Yevamos Amrinan, we say, call me she'eno osek bifriya urevia. The Gemara says any person who is not involved in being fruitful and multiplying. We have a mitzvah in the Torah to be fruitful and multiply, meaning to bring children into the world. If a person is not doing that in circumstances when they are able to do that, and they should do that, in other words, when the mitzvah applies to them in terms of their age and being married, etc., and their health and other things. But if they're in a situation and they haven't brought children into the world, and they're capable and are able to fulfill the mitzvah of doing so, but they do not do so, Gorein l'shchina shetistalek mi Yisrael, that causes the shchina, the divine presence, to depart from the Jewish people. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, liyos lechol lelokim, to be for you a God, ulizar acho acharecha, and for your children after you. Now here comes the Chazal's statement, their drosha on that pasuk. Bizman shezaracha acharecha, at a time when your children will come after you, meaning at a time when a person has brought children into the world, shechina shora, then the divine presence can rest on that person. Ein zaracha acharecha, if you haven't brought children into the world, shechina al mishore. Who is the Shekhinah supposed to rest upon? Al ha'etzim v'al ha'avonim, on wood and stone? Ad kan, until here is a quote from the Gemara. So the Zera Shimshon has shown us in two different Gemaras that the Shekhinah, the presence of the resting of the divine presence among us, in one Gemara is dependent upon being in Eretz Yisrael, and in the other Gemara is dependent upon having children. So we're going to see what he does with that in the next paragraph. Ume'ata, and from now, Zeh shedar be'eretz Yisrael, a person who lives in Eretz Yisrael, who dar sham kedei sheyeh lo hashra shechina. He's living in Eretz Yisrael in order to help bring the Shekhinah and allow the Shekhinah to rest among the Jewish people. V'hashra shechina bo al yedei abonim. And we now also know that in addition to being in Eretz Yisrael, the person has to have children to maintain the presence of the divine presence. If so, al korchach tzarech lishanos mazolo. If so, if a person needs to have children to retain the divine presence in Eretz Yisrael, then that person needs to have his or her mazel changed. Inyan habonim, because in terms of children, mikre yeshivas Eretz Yisrael zechus gadol. Living in Eretz Yisrael is considered an extraordinary zechus in terms of having children. Aval l'shar mile, but in other matters, meaning in terms of sustenance and in terms of long life, extended years, low. Then living in Eretz Yisrael does not necessarily have an impact in those areas, but it does have an impact in terms of children, because midah keneged midah, Hashem rewards a person and says, you have moved to Eretz Yisrael, and Eretz Yisrael, the Hashras Hashchina, the divine presence can rest among the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael, and in order for that to happen to you, you're going to need to have children. So the special reward is you move to Eretz Yisrael, you'll be able to have children there, and you can therefore merit the divine presence resting among you. Next paragraph. Umishum hachi, because of this, achar shekosav losia mishakela. After the pasuk talked about there will not be a woman who can't have children, God forbid, v'chule, etc. Dahainu sheyishtana hamazel, which means a person's mazel can be changed. Kosav, it wrote es mispar yomecha amale. The days of your life I will fill. Not the days of your life I will lengthen, I will extend, but rather the days of your life I will fill. Beli shinoi mazel. That means without changing a person's mazel. In other words, the pasuk is saying you will be able to live all the years that were originally established for you, but not that those years will be added to. Kedei shelo nomar, in order that we shouldn't say keshem, just like, next page, top right, shemishtane hamazel bibonim. You might have thought just like a person's mazel can be changed regarding children, kach yishtane b'chaim, so too it can be changed in terms of the length of years of a person's life. So the Torah is teaching you not like that. The Torah is saying when it comes to children, then as long as it's in Eretz Yisrael, a person's mazel can be changed. However, right after that it says, and I will fill the number of your days, not extend them, not doing something that would change a person's mazel, but making sure, even in challenging, dangerous circumstances, as the Zera Shimshon explained above, even so, a person's number of years will be maintained. Last paragraph, second to last paragraph. V'hakosov sidron lefi hatzorech. And now the Zera Shimshon says, let's look at why the pasuk ordered the three things the way it did. And he says it put them in the order that they become necessary in a person's life. Shemitchila adim tzarech lemizonos. Very early on, a person needs food. So that's why the pasuk talked about Hashem blessing a person's bread and water, a blessing a person's food first. That a person needs from infancy. Afterwards, it talked about the special promise of children, because after a person needs food and grows up, then they're going to become of an age when they want to bring children into the world. Ve'acher kach, and later in life, after they've gone through their youth and they had enough food to eat and survive, and now they've even brought children into the world, and now they're older than that, in adulthood and older, then they're going to want to have long life. Zehu, and this is what the pasuk means, uveirach es lachmacha. First, the pasuk talked about Hashem blessing your bread. Then it talked about Losia Mishakela, there will not be a woman who can't have children. And then at the end of the pasuk of the two psukim, Es Mispar Yomecha Amale, I will fill the days, the number of your days. So it's an exact order of the way a person would think about and need those things in his or her life. Last paragraph, the Zera Shimshon is going to circle all the way back to the question that we posed in the very beginning of why the Zera Shimshon and the Gemara, for that matter, talk about three promises and seem to leave out or not address the promise of removing disease among you, which seems like a fourth promise. So let's look at that right now in the last paragraph. Eitzel hamazonos, when it comes to sustenance, ksiv, the pasuk had the words v'hasirosi machala mikirbecha. I will remove disease or illness from among you. In other words, what does it mean regarding sustenance? Because the pasuk started off by saying, Hashem will bless your bread and your water. And right after those words, it said, and I will remove disease from among you. Lefi shehu inyan toloi b'mizonos. Disease and removal of disease is something directly dependent upon a person's food, what a person eats. Kemosha amru zichronim levracha, like Chazal said in Maseches Baba Kama, machala, the word machala, disease, as we just saw in the pasuk about Hashem removing illness or disease, zo mora. This is a reference to the gallbladder, the bile from the gallbladder. Shepei gimel chaloyim pluyim ba. Because there are 83 diseases that are dependent upon how a person's gallbladder is, the health of a person's gallbladder and the bile that comes out of the gallbladder and how that affects the person. The gematria of the word machala, mem ches lamed hey, is 83. So Chazal say machala is a reference to the 83 diseases that can be related to the gallbladder. V'chulan, in all of them, all of those diseases, pas shacharis mivatalton. The eating bread in the morning, having a nice breakfast in the morning, can nullify those things. The Gemara actually doesn't just say bread and water. If a person has a meal in the morning, that can nullify and protect him or her from those 83 diseases that come from the gallbladder and the bile. The Ode beperek daled diksubas, another proof that diseases and mizonos go together, and diseases should be subsumed under mizonos in the pasuk, under sustenance in the pasuk. Amrinan is the fact that the Gemara says refuah hi kimizonos, the money that a husband would have to pay for his wife's medical bills, they go under the category of mizonos, of food. So the husband is obligated, one of a husband's obligations is to provide his wife with mizonos, with food, with sustenance. Subsumed under substance are also medical bills. So we see that refuah fits under the category of providing food. So when it says in the pasuk, Hashem will bless your bread and your water and remove disease from you, we don't view removal of disease as a separate independent promise and blessing. We view it as something inside the category of the words that just came before it of Hashem blessing our lechem and mayim, our food and our water, our sustenance, and it's not counted as its own category. So we really are talking about three haftachos, three promises, as opposed to four different promises. So the Zera Shimshon has started with two psukim from our Parsha, which, as is many times the case, we might have just read and thought, okay, we understand these psukim, we're getting blessed in these three areas, that's what it's talking about. But the Zera Shimshon has shown us that there is so much more to those haftachos, to those promises and blessings, and we should merit all of the blessings and promises and good things that the Torah promises to the Jewish people, and among them keeping the mitzvot, serving Hashem, and God willing, bringing the redemption speedily in our days. Thank you for joining us this week. God willing, we look forward to learning together again next week in the Zera Shimshon.